Welcome back to the Early Weigh-In Podcast. After a massive pay-per-view last week, UFC is treating us again. This week we got UFC 268, and the main event is probably the most anticipated rematch that comes to mind for me. We got the welterweight title up for grabs between Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington. And then again in the co-main event, another huge rematch between Namajunas and Zhang Weili. Can't leave out Gaethje and Chandler, man. It's in MSG in New York. Saturday's going to be pretty effing nuts, and we've profited 3 of our last 4 weeks, riding some momentum. We've already locked in a couple plays, man, so I'll let you go over all that.
Yeah, so last week it was a good one for us. We ended up profiting 2.6 units. We'll start off with going over the Dan Hooker fight. He looked like a plus 500 in that fight.
He did.
It seemed like something that we had to take a stab on, but Islam definitely proved that he's on a different level.
Yeah, Hooker seemed to panic as soon as I hit the mat, man.
Mm-hmm. And rightfully so.
Yeah, he did.
Zubaira Tukhugov, we put 1.5 units on him, and we were pretty confident going into the decision. At minus 165, I think that was a good value bet.
For sure.
Moving on to our big 5-unit parlay, probably the best 2 parlay pieces you could have asked for on the card. Obviously in that first round, Volkan's going to have some power, and they are 205ers, so I was gritting my teeth a little bit. But Ankalaev kind of coasted to that one.
Real deal.
And Chimaev, maybe one of the most dominant performances I've ever seen in my life. I don't know, man. I think he's probably the future. Yeah, super excited to see him.
Man, he could be fighting one of these guys in the main event pretty soon.
Mm-hmm. Ankalaev by submission. There was a point in time in that fight.
1 little second.
Oh my gosh, I thought it was going to happen. He kind of took the back, but ended up giving it up.
Line was still crazy.
Line was still crazy. Plus 2,600, I'd hit it all over again. Yuya Zhang versus Andre Petrovsky fight doesn't go the distance. Oh my gosh.
Our middleweight
specialty. Probably worst case scenario. I think, that was as close as that fight could have gotten to not hitting. I don't know, was it 15 seconds left?
Something like that. But, man, Petrovsky looked zapped on the feet. He blocked in multiple arm triangles and stuff. Plenty of opportunities for that fight to end way before that, though.
Surprised to see him actually have the strength to finish out that submission that far into the 3rd round.
Back-to-back round 3 finishes for the guy who gets his cardio shit on all the time.
Yeah, honestly, I was kissing that bet goodbye when it happened, and we were screaming whenever it did. Duraev inside the distance.
Close, man.
It was close, but ultimately I wouldn't have liked to have made that bet again. We had to pay minus 140 to get it there, and Duraev, he just hadn't proved enough in the UFC for us to be backing him like we should, I guess. Volkov wins by TKO. Plus 150. I think that there was value there, but you said it earlier. Volkov looked a little bit off that night.
Man. Gas way quicker than we normally see that.
And, looking back on it, it's a heavyweight fight. The more I think about it, the more I feel like those light heavyweight and the heavyweight fights, it's a tough one to call because there is such little margin for error in those fights, and it's a shit show of a division if you ask me.
Volkov was your parlay buster, and I know 1-1 going into the 3rd round. I know a bunch of people were sweating that stuff.
For sure. Ulanbekov to win. That was who we had parlayed with Ismagulov.
Yeah.
Thankfully, that fight got called off because we were definitely worried about Ismagulov. Yes. Ulanbekov sitting at minus 340. Probably wouldn't play that one again.
Right.
Although he did, arguably win every single round. In that 2nd round, there were some spots where we thought that he was about to get submitted.
Yeah, 2nd one he squeaked by as a massive favorite.
So ultimately, good night, and we're going to look to keep the ball rolling. We already have 4 picks for this week. A 2-unit bet on the main event, Colby Covington.
Yes, sir. Chaos, baby.
We'll break more into that later, but we are excited to hit Covington, especially at this type of price tag. Then we have Rose Namajunas.
Back to the first time.
Insane that we're getting her at underdog odds right here. We got her at minus 105 and went ahead and laid a unit. I think it'll probably be around there the entire week, and more than happy to get underdog odds. Justin Gaethje versus Michael Chandler. We've another 2-unit bet for us. We beat the line. We got it at minus 175, and we're both feeling pretty confident about that one. And then, it could be one of the more square bets of the night, but I truly believe that Gian Villante is the real fighter of these two.
The much better fighter, I agree with you.
And getting him at pick'em odds, we're more than happy to take a stab on that.
Absolutely.
Our first fight takes place in the flyweight division, where we see CJ Vergara making his debut against Ode Osbourne. This will be Osbourne's second time cutting to flyweight, and the first time probably didn't go as he wanted it to. He ended up losing to Manuel Kopp, who we actually jumped on that line, and we're happy to cash on it. That actually gave Ode his first KO loss of his career, which is not something that you want to see in somebody who's cutting that type of weight for the first time. Ode is usually training out of Pure Vita BJJ in Wisconsin with Zach Otto and Montel Jackson, but he's recently moved to Syndicate MMA and he's been training with John Wood. Okay. I think Ode is the side for sure, but the winning path that Vergara has kind of plays right into getting chin checked, or Ode getting chin checked. Vergara is one of those guys who likes to bob and weave and get on the inside and try and land those power shots, sometimes to a fault, as we've seen in a couple of his past fights. He himself gets chin checked quite a bit, and that's not something that you want to see. For Ode to win this fight, I think he's going to have to utilize his reach in that bigger octagon to keep his distance. And when it does come in close, I think he needs to engage in the grappling. Although Ode's only a purple belt, I do think that he has the edge on him on the mat. And I think that the size advantage might play a factor for Ode. So with everything being said, I like Ode. I probably won't be playing him as this is, his second time at flyweight. Gives me some concern. How are you feeling about it?
I'm on the Ode side as well. I was telling you, on the feet, I do favor Ode. Definitely favor Ode on the mat. I definitely feel like that is an area that he could exploit as well. In the UFC, we just kind of got a weird showing of Ode because every single fight we've seen so far has been in a different weight class for him. Mm-hmm. You take on Brian Kelleher in your debut and you end up getting guillotined. And it's like, that's his patented submission. It's whatever. Then, you go up to 145 and you get, what's his name?
Jerome Rivera.
Yeah, it's just like, that dude's about as bad as you could get, and it's at 145. And then when his first time cutting to flyweight, he gets, he kind of gets flash KO'd. So, yeah, it's a bit worrisome that that's just 3 months ago and we've not really got a full taste of the Ode Osbourne that we're going to get yet. But, yeah, man, he's huge for flyweight. He's got a 73-inch reach, and he really likes to use it. With CJ Vergara, he is on a 5-fight win streak, and the dude's finished every single one of these guys. One being Jacob Silva. Jacob Silva's kind of got a mush record, but he's pretty much a mainstay on the regional. That if you're a flyweight or bantamweight, you got to go through Jacob Silva to get to the UFC. But on the Contender Series against Bruno Correa, there's not much of a better showing that I can in recent memory. He absolutely walked him down and beat his ass and dropped him with a knee to the liver and completely shut his body off. He's really good inside the clinch, exits well and he strikes well, but I don't really, he was an underdog going into that Bruno Correa fight. It's like a plus 170, not necessarily supposed to win that fight. I don't necessarily know if CJ is UFC caliber. To be honest with you, I think he's going to be a bottom level flyweight.
Does it concern you at all that 2 of his last 3 knockouts are coming by how Ode just got knocked out?
I was about to say, he's got a flying knee and stuff, but I don't put CJ Vergara on the same level of striking as Manel Cape, by no means. Like I said, if it goes back to where I pretty much favor Ode Osbourne everywhere, but you're paying a price tag at almost minus 175, minus 180 at this point, so, although I like to have first action on the first fight, probably lay off here. And,
you talked about Ode being huge. They say that they're only 1 inch apart, but I really do think that size is going to be very apparent in weigh-ins.
And, not only that, and just the way Ode fights being so long with that reach, once they get in there, Sugar Sean's listed as the same height as a lot of guys, but once you get in there, he just fights so long. He looks so much bigger than guys, and CJ could have some trouble closing the distance, but yeah. Ode's aside, but it's still a sketch pick to me.
For sure.
Next up in the featherweight division, we have Melsik Baghdasaryan, who's 6-1, taking on Bruno Souza, who's 10-1. With Melsik, he trains alongside Edmen Shahbazyan at the Glendale Fight Club in Arizona. Man, they fight really similar. Melsik got the kickboxing background. You can really see it on the feet. The guy's extremely, extremely technical. He switches levels with his left hand and his left kicks phenomenally. You see him go to the body a ton, then slip him up high and get the finish like he did in the Colin Anglin fight. Guy damages it in and out of the clinch, and watching tape on him is just fun as hell, to be honest with you. But kind of like Edmen, there's going to be some question marks for, what happens when he gets drugged late by, a really, really good wrestler. We saw him fight Dennis Bazooka on the Contender Series, and it does go to decision. And it's like, Bazooka was pretty much just as tired, so he wasn't able to exploit that. But as he might get, someone like a really good wrestler, like Edmen started getting, the upper echelon of the division, I think he potentially could get exposed. Where Bruno Souza, he's currently the LFA featherweight champion, just won it a couple, weeks ago. He won it against Javier Garcia is his name. And, man, he's dropped right out of the gates and hurt bad in round one, possibly 10-8'd in round one. And it's like, for a guy who has a world championship in karate and trains under, Machida, his striking defense really didn't look that great to me. And he's got split decisions over Kamuela Kirk, Elijah Johns, a DQ win over Mike Hamill. Any other night they go the other way and he doesn't get the DQ, or Mike Hamill doesn't get the DQ. 7-4 is not as pretty as 10-1. If the guys close fights with guys that I think are far less caliber than Melsik Baghdasaryan. Bruno Souza doesn't pose as the type to be able to drag him late, use that grappling. It's going to be a striking, and honestly, man, I like Melsik here inside the distance.
Shoo. So I like Melsik here. I would agree with you on that. And you talked about it. That's offense is your best defense personified right there. He only has that one loss, and it's coming in his debut, and by the method you would expect, a submission. By a high level striker, that's going to be where their weakness is, and that's going to be a huge concern for me moving forward in his UFC career. I'm not sure if Bruno Souza, being a purebred striker, is going to exploit it, but I do think that he has the credentials where if Melsik kind of puts too much pressure on him early, like he has in his past fights, I could definitely see Souza being the one to kind of go away from the game plan and try and initiate those grappling exchanges. He is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that really does worry me. I think that Souza, although he did get caught a couple times in his last fight, he has good counters, and if this fight does stay at kicking range, I do think that he has the edge here. Like you said, we've not really seen Baghdasaryan kind of push any other pace than pedal to the gas. So my pick is going to be Melsik, but I do think that Souza's going to be able to ward it off long enough and then throw in those grappling exchanges to kind of keep Melsik guessing. The Contender Series fight with Dennis Bazooka, I think it's going to go very similarly, where we see Souza, who's able to take quite a bit of damage. He also has some offensive tools of his own, and we'll see Melsik by decision. I think he'll ultimately throw more volume and convincingly win those rounds just by having the more forward pressure than Souza.
Yeah, Melsik's like a minus 270, and for a guy who's only a second fight in, I'd be pretty hesitant to lay minus 270, but you can get his TKO prop at like plus 160. If you're going to back him, honestly, I think that is a much better line. It's usually his path to victory that he has. I'm a little bit more confident than you on Melsik Baghdasaryan, but,
Still untested.
Exactly.
And, so it's
a pretty hefty price tag to pay for an untested guy.
For sure. Our next fight takes place in the light heavyweight division, where we see Dustin Jacoby taking on Allan. Jacoby comes from a kickboxing Muay Thai background, and when he made his return to the UFC, I thought it was going to go pretty similar to his first run, and I was wrong.
Yeah, man.
Jacoby is now 3-0-1 in the UFC and remains one of the more difficult fighters for me personally to cap. I think I've actually misjudged every single one of his fights. And to be fair, I think he's answered a lot of the questions that I had concerns for since coming into the UFC. He's training out of Factory X Muay Thai, and I wouldn't necessarily say that he's patched up those holes in his takedown defense, but he definitely has developed a solid get-up game and proven that he has that dog when it comes to this cardio and his toughness, such as like surviving that Iaquinta fight. Right. Offensively, on the feet, he's a fucking nightmare, and he has those great calf kicks and a great distance control, and if it stays on the feet, I think that he could outstrike a good chunk of this division. Allan, on the other hand, he's 0-2-1 if you count the Contender Series loss to Vinicius Moreira. Definitely a tough guy to get a read on. He did end up beating Slow Mike Rodriguez, and I think that that's a fight that I'm trying to draw some comparisons to, because Allan did have the grappling upside in that fight and leaned on some takedowns to take away that length of Mike Rodriguez. That being said, he's been out grappled twice now, so he's not the best in his own right.
And neither is Mike.
Neither is Mike. He's got a pretty good striking game, and Allan's got a pretty good striking game, but I think he'll be at a speed disadvantage. And even on a week's notice, I think Jacoby's probably got his number.
Yeah, man. You spoke of Factory X Muay Thai. They're constantly having guys take short notice fights. They keep their guys in phenomenal shape there, and Jacoby being on a run kind of like he is and just going out there and finishing Darren Stewart the way he did, man, this is honestly one of the easier matchups that I think he's had in a very, very long time. You go from Cutelaba and Darren Stewart to John Allan here.
That's a good point.
It is, I think.
Maxim Grishin even. That's
right,
a tough
and
fight.
Maxim Grishin that weighed in at like 210 pounds. I think his team and everybody know that it's going to be a good fight here and a good matchup for him. He kind of had a weird path, he kind of did the glory kickboxing stuff. He actually, I think, got knocked out by Alex Pereira, who we end up we see later on in the card. And even when he spent time in MMA at Bellator, he fought King Mo and John Salter, who just got through fighting Gengar Mousasi. He's fought at a pretty decent level before coming back to the UFC. But once he's been back, I honestly think I've seen him improve from fight to fight to fight. You talked about him answering a whole lot of those questions that he had. The Cutelaba fight, he got taken down a bunch, but he took very little damage in round one, and without a doubt, definitely won 2 and 3. Made a case for himself. If a lot of judges didn't give that a 10-8 in round one, on the feet, twice as good as John Allan in my opinion. And while John Allan does have what you would call a grappling path here, it's no more than a Maxim Grishin or a Cutelaba is going to pose to him.
It's actually far less. I think about it.
And you talk about his win over Slow Mike. He pops by USADA after that, so it's like, I don't really know what to take from it and stuff. Slow Mike is also not somebody that I think is very good. I think John Allen's just going to have to swing big bombs to close the distance. He's going to get his calf chewed up, and the longer this stays on the feet, it's just playing into Dustin Jacoby's game. I'm going to go with Dustin Jacoby be a TKO, man. To go out there and finish a guy like Darren Stewart, I think he can 100% go out here and finish John Allan.
So I would like to agree with you. Just Allan has never been finished on the feet. So
he's a tough SOB.
Yeah, for sure. And, if he's taking those heavyweight shots from Mike Rodriguez, I do think that Dustin Jacoby, well, at least it was light heavyweight shots from Mike Rodriguez. Rodriguez is a huge guy, a good striker, and I do think that he'll be able to outlast this, at least to see the judges, although even money on Dustin Jacoby inside the distance is tempting.
Yeah, so you remember last time with Dustin Jacoby and Darren Stewart, they gave us plus money for the fight not going the distance, and we thought that was an absolute steal. You're going to give us light heavyweights at plus money. I think we should check this line and potentially see what they're going to give us at this one, too.
I like it.
Moving up to the heavyweight division, man, what an absolute killer fight here. We got Gian Villante, who's 17-13, taking on Chris Barnett, who's 21-7. It's the only heavyweight fight of the night, I'm pretty sure, and it honestly does not get any lower level heavyweights than this right here. Villante has absolutely looked like a shell of his former self, and Chris Barnett, man,
He looks like a turtle shell.
He's a joke, man. And honestly, I hate to say it, but it's comical, man, to me. Betting John Villante is something that I never thought I'd hear come out of my mouth, especially right now. The dude has lost 6 of his last 8 fights, and the 2 that he won, he squeaks by split decision while getting outstruck, and doesn't really make a good case for him to win that. And I know we missed out on plus money somehow on John Villante, but the minus 105 price tag we got, I 100% think he's the better fighter here. For Barnett, he is like a third-degree black belt in Taekwondo. You'll see him throw some spinning techniques. He's relatively fast, I guess you could say, because he's so undersized for the heavyweight division. But, dude, he's like, 5'9". Villante's like 6'4". Villante is the better fighter, man. There's no other words about it for me. We faded Chris Barnett last time out with Ben Rothwell. He's a Bob Sapp to me, man. He travels the world fighting crazy organizations, taking whatever paycheck, and he's an entertainment aspect to me, man. John Villante is the rightful favorite here, or should be, as the line's closed, moving, rightful favorite here.
So this is Gian Villante's 18th UFC appearance. if you're trying to convince me that Chris Barnett's gonna be in here for even 3 more fights, you're out of your fucking mind, right, man. At one point in time, Gian Villante was good enough to be the possibly Bellator light heavyweight champion in Corey Anderson. That's something that Chris Barnett could never ever say in his life. You know, Chris Barnett is probably one of the worst additions to the roster I've seen in a very long time, and he's kind of climbed his way to the UFC, just becoming like that meme style fighter.
For sure, yeah.
People just like to back him because he looks the way he does. I mean, honestly, the debut against Ben Rothwell, it was one of the biggest fades I've ever placed personally, and I get that he's fun to watch, but he is so undersized in this division. I know that Gian Villante is kind of just fat, but he is
so is Chris.
He's
mouth breathing a minute in.
Right. It's like, you know, I get he might have taken that fight on short notice, but I know that he hasn't switched up really any of his camp. He's still training at Knuckle Up MMA in Athens, Georgia. And from what I can tell, Gian Villante has been posting training pictures. I saw it in some of his tagged photos, so I at least know he's not getting up off the couch for this fight. And I think even if the shell of Gian Villante comes out here, he will whoop up on Chris Barnett, who shouldn't have ever been in the UFC to begin with.
No, and he's a Long Island native. We've seen him slip by with some split decisions. The UFC is not going to give Chris Barnett a greasy decision here. I don't even want to spend too much time on it, even though we have put a unit on Gian Villante. He's a better fighter, plain and simple to me.
I love it. Our next fight takes place in the welterweight division, where we see Jordan Williams taking on Ian Garry. And what can I say, man? This is a setup fight if I've ever seen one. Ian Garry seems to be the next big thing coming out of Ireland. He was the Cage Warriors welterweight champion, and he's now moved to training in the States at Sanford MMA after signing his contract with the UFC. Since he was 10 years old, he's been in combat sports. He started with boxing, and he has since kind of flipped the switch and transitioned into MMA, taking his first amateur fight only 3.5 years ago, and now we see him stepping into the UFC at only 23 years old. If any of the words from his coaches and partners at Sanford MMA hold true, he's going to make a huge impact here. Jordan Williams, on the other hand, kind of got an asterisk by his name. I have to bring up that he's a diabetic, and for the longest time, he couldn't really cut weight because of that. And it was really hard backing somebody who I knew was undersized. Well, now he's finally at 170, and I thought that we'd see him kind of do well. I think I actually bet him against Mickey Gall, right, and he got fucking worked, dude.
Yeah, he did, man.
He got dropped, got out grappled, and it's tough for me to want to back him at all here. Being said, he's proved me wrong before. He went toe-to-toe with RoboCop, who we just saw.
And Imavov,
who we just saw whoop ass. And so I personally think that we can fully anticipate Jordan Williams coming in here for a war. And if Ian Garry meets him in the middle, I think that the safest play for this fight is the doesn't go the distance. And I'm even looking at the under 1.5 here.
Nice, man. I love doesn't go the distance. And I've been telling you about Ian Garry for a minute because he is a guy that I really think, like you said, has potential to be a breakout superstar here. With Jordan Williams, though, real fast, he's out of Factory X Muay Thai. Expect a good gas tank from him. And up at 185, you talked about him throwing down, knocking out RoboCop. The shots he was eating from Imavov, dude, I vividly remember saying when breaking down the Mickey Gall fight, he ain't gonna be worried about the power coming back his way from Mickey, and dude, Mickey dropped him like twice, and maybe the doctors were right about not wanting to cut the weight and stuff, because to see him wear those shots at 185 to then make that weight cut and get dropped for a guy who's not known to be a striker, it is worrisome. And then on the side of Ian Garry, man, I really, really like this guy. You can tell he's been boxing for some time. He's a black belt in judo, and his size for the division, it's phenomenal. There's very few people that Jordan Williams is going to come down a weight division and still get met eye to eye like he will with Ian Garry. Ian Garry's lead hand, it's always so busy, man. He's constantly putting the jab in your face. Good little short left hook. He's got a nice calf kick himself. And he does a really good job of just like keeping people on the end of his punches, how I say Amanda Nunes does. It's just like perfect range. There's just a snap right on the end of her punches. And Ian Garry just knows how to keep the people, his opponents just right there on the edge of them. He does have a wide stance. I feel like a guy with a good calf kick will probably cause Ian Garry some trouble. And at 23, he's got a big frame, so, man, he gives up some strength. He hasn't really filled out yet, you know, and I do feel like in a division full of some strong grapplers, you got to bring him up slow, you know. But with Conor McGregor kind of being the way he is now, the Irish mob of fans are really, really waiting for their next superstar, man. And I do think if brought up the right way, there's a ton of success in Ian Garry's future.
And you brought up a good point about the doctors just might being right about him not being able to cut to 170. In all 3 of the knockout losses that he has on his record, it was at 170. And I know that Mickey Gall's technically isn't a knockout loss, but if you watch that fight, he got knocked out a couple times.
Before getting rear naked choke, for
right.
sure.
So maybe even looking at Ian Garry inside the distance if you do want to play him. But like you said, minus 350 for a debutante, a little sketchy.
Yeah, especially, you know, he's gone through Cage Warriors, but, you know, not Contender Series tested or nothing, and now he's straight in MSG. You know, watching some little highlights and stuff on him and some videos that the UFC put out. He seems to have an awesome head on his shoulders, and he seems to be ready for the superstardom and stuff. And man, I'm really happy seeing Garry in the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we're in the middleweight division for the casual cap of the night. We got Edmen Shahbazyan, who's 11-2, taking on Nassourdine Imavov, who's 10-3. With Edmen, he's at the Glendale Fighting Academy, but he does look like he, you know, he didn't post anything, but there's some things I saw Habib and Islam and stuff, and he's in the background at AKA and stuff, wrestling with them, and you know, maybe it took a good old-fashioned ass whooping from Hermanson and Brunson to put him in the wrestling room like he was supposed to. But man, prior to that, you saw him putting away tough guys like Marshman, dude. You know, Strickland was literally yelling at him to fall, and Edmonds out here putting him away in the first round. Brad Tavares, tough-ass Hawaiian, knocked out in the first round. Edmonds a really tough kickboxer, excellent timing on his right hand, and much like Ian Garry, does a really good job at hiding his kicks behind his punches. But man, you know, I've been burnt on Edmen one too many times, man. And you know, you look at the Darren Stewart fight in round 3, the Derek Brunson fight, the Jack Hermanson fight. Man, Edmen's just not improved in the areas that he most desperately needs to improve in. Where Nassourdine, he's just as promising of a prospect to me, man. He's 25 years old. He comes out of the MMA factory working a lot with Cyril Gahn, and him and Edmen are very similar stylistic fighters. You know, they like to keep the range. They're primarily kickboxers. And, you know, I see him get out wrestled and stuck on the fence by Phil Hawes, but I do think Imavov has got better wrestling in the back pocket that if he needs to use it, he can. Imavov's just shown a real good gas tank for me, man, and he's coming off an absolute ass kicking, the first person ever to finish Ian Heinisch on the feet. I like Nassourdine, and it's gonna be shitty, man, if you beat me next week with my boy. But I've kind of lost faith in him, man. I'm gonna go Nassourdine Imavov.
I was about to say it makes it just that much sweeter if Edmen pulls this off. To be honest with you, though, I love picking against Edmen, and I was kind of,
the best pick I think you've ever made is Derek Brunson at like plus 300, man. And it was like, this is not a shot. Like, Derek Brunson's winning this.
Right. That really did start off my hatred towards Edmen Shahbazyan. But that being said, I do think that this fight is one where it's pretty even. Mm-hmm. Both these guys, like you said, they kind of match each other's skill sets. And I could definitely see this being a shit show. The biggest problem, obviously, being Edmen's cardio, which, damn, dude, you know, he's 23 years old in the prime of his athletic career, I guess. For most people, maybe not the sport of MMA, but for most people, and he can't fix that cardio, man. Yeah. I mean, he's had plenty of opportunities to fix it. This is now his 6th fight in the UFC, and it's every single time that he gets out of that first round.
Treadmills aren't expensive.
No, they're really not. I think that he's a little bit of a quitter. You know, he faced a quitter in Jack Hermanson last time, but Edmen's a little bit of a quitter.
Even a patient first round with Hermanson still gasses in 2 and 3, man.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if he needs to try and move down a weight class or possibly even move up.
It might just be the grappling, man. I think nobody in Glendale's testing that grappling, and you know, you and I can attest to it. You know, we can run, we can get on elliptical, a treadmill. That ain't grappling cardio, man, you know?
From what I can see, you know, people that come out of that Glendale Fighting Club, it's a lot of hype trains, man. That's what makes me hesitant to back Melsik. That's what makes me, you know, what made me hesitant to back Edmen in any of his other fights. For this one, I know Edmen opened as the favorite, which is another thing that kind of just made me feel like this is a good one for the casual cap. It's not that I have a huge lean on either one of these guys. I don't think it sees the judges. I'm pretty confident in that. I don't think that Edmen has it in him, but I do think that he has the ability to finish pretty much anybody on the feet. And, you know, if he can do it to Brad Tavares, I do think that he could catch anybody at that weight class.
Yeah, this is going to be a close fight, man. And I think it's the closest aligned fight besides, like, you know, the Rose and some of those pick'ems and stuff. So I like the stylistics, how they match each other. Like you said, it's going to be a fun casual cap.
Our next fight takes place in the middleweight division, where we see Phil Megatron Hawes taking on Chris Curtis in his long-awaited UFC debut. Last time that Chris Curtis was on the Contender Series, he kind of got snuffed. He ended up getting the finish, but not the contract. And he had to fight his way back, man. He ended up going to the PFL and dropping three fights actually, to two of their top welterweights, and the key word there being a welterweight. Chris Curtis definitely shouldn't be at the 185, and he's matched up against a really tough opponent here in Phil Hawes, who is just an absolute brute for the division. Hawes is somebody who has shown holes in his game, but since the Julian Marquez fight in his first Contender Series debut, nobody's been able to expose it, man. There's been a lot of people like Imavov and Dawkins in his last few fights that have gotten really, really close, but ultimately not able to do it. I think if Curtis does have success in this fight, it's going to be setting that high pace and trying to take advantage of Hawes in that third round when he does start to get lazy and drop his defense. But that's a big if, man. And honestly, I don't like laying minus 350 on Hawes against anyone, so I'll most likely stay away, but I'll be silently rooting for Curtis to kind of make a splash in his long-awaited debut.
Not really much I can add, to be honest with you. I'm not eager to play Hawes at minus 330 or whatever he is right now, but to Hawes' defense, I've always said is, you know, his career was just always rushed. Just, you know, he was the JUCO national champion. He's built like a brick shit house, and like 3 fights in, you know, they put him on into tough house, and he's having to fight a collegiate wrestler in Andrew Sanchez and stuff, you know, and a few fights later, boom, Julian Marquez, when he's like, you know, 5 fights into his career, PFL's, you know, Luis Taylor that he has to fight it. And then now, you know, when you give him the little bit lower level competition, you see him at Sanford MMA, and man, you know, in this past 2, the questions that Phil Hawes used to have about his cardio have really been answered, you know. And while there were times on the feet where it did get kind of sketchy, you know, he's there for the full 3 rounds. And in round 3, I'm pretty sure he won round 3 of both of those fights. I know he did in the Imavov fight by getting his wrestling, putting him up against the fence and doing what he had to do. You know, his striking is improving over a lot with Henry Hoof, but he's going to have a big wrestling advantage over Chris Curtis here. And I don't think it's just due to the fact that him being a middleweight and stronger. I think he's purely a much, much better wrestler than Chris Curtis is. And Chris Curtis has kind of shown a weakness there in the past. It's going to be, can Hawes, you know, wrestle for 15 minutes? Because come round 3, you know, and especially anytime it's on the feet, it can get a bit sketch for Phil Hawes. Where Chris Curtis, you talked about, you know, him over in PFL. He fought Magomed Karamov and Ray Cooper, who just duked it out and went to war last week. So you talked about him fighting tough competition. And, you know, the 5-fight win streak that he's on right now, it is definitely not the toughest of competition. It's no guys like he was fighting over in PFL. But he's got a real good gas tank, real good left hand. And, you know, if he's still there in round 3, he might stand a chance, man. But, you know, it was supposed to be booked a couple weeks ago when Drawn Wynn fell out. Chris Curtis steps in, and then Phil Hawes, like, denies taking the fight. I know he got a little shit for it, but, you know, it's a big stylistic matchup from a big wrestler that you were about to get in Drawn Wynn. So, you know, I'm sure he has no problem in fighting the welterweight. Just wanted a couple more weeks to look at it and game plan for it. I got Phil Hawes here, but I'm not going to lay anything on it. Next up in the lightweight division, we see Raging Iaquinta making his return, taking on Bobby Green. With Iaquinta, he trains at Alongo MMA there in New York with John Villante, Merab, Aljamain. But, you know, he does his real estate out here, and when guys, you know, kind of don't have their whole heart in MMA and they found other revenues and money, they're not training the way they used to, man. And, you know, I truly can't expect the best Iaquinta to show up here on Saturday. He's been out for over 2 years here, and the last couple fights, he's just absolutely getting picked apart by both Dan Hooker and Cowboy Cerrone. The biggest knock I have on him is just his output. He kind of comes out there and just kind of looks to stay in boxing range and counter. Al's not starting much of the striking exchanges, but with Bobby Green's going to have that volume. He's gonna have be in Al's face, and he's going to be there for Al to counter. With Bobby Green, I call him like the Angela Hill of men's MMA. It's like he is constantly notorious for just leaving these fights super close, and man, when MMA judging is notorious for being awful, and you're gonna get burnt when you go to the judges, and man, you're fighting Al in his backyard of New York, and I hate banking on Bobby Green here. I told you it's like an ego issue I think that he has. I knew like he has a grappling advantage, but over Fiziev, but he's not gonna grapple Fiziev. He's just got an ego issue, man. He fights the way he fights, and it doesn't matter if he has an advantage somewhere. Bobby Green's going to put his hands down. He's going to strike, and he's going to give Iaquinta the type of fight that Iaquinta's going to want here, the type of fight that Iaquinta can possibly make this a squeaky decision. My pick is Bobby Green. It's obviously going to be by decision. It sucks that you still get minus 120. You don't even get plus money for it. But, man, I know DK, DraftKings always has the split decision props, and I bet Al's is pretty juicy. I might have to lay on that sitting in New York, but man, I'm not eager to bet Bobby Green, but I think he outvolumes Al to a decision here.
So I would agree that I think this fight probably remains on the feet for the entire time. And, both these guys have the wrestling to fall back on, but like you said, they're not really ones to use it. Right. Iaquinta, he does have two really impressive wins you got to touch on if you break him down, and that's the Kevin Lee fights. Beat him at two different points in his career too, right, which kind of shows you he's just the better fighter, or at least has Kevin Lee's number. Right. I think that he's one of these fighters that is well-rounded enough to expose holes in one-dimensional fighters, but he's not exceptionally good anywhere. And to be honest with you, I've kind of thought that Iaquinta is by far the worst guy in the top 10 for the longest time.
It's funny that you say that about him because of my notes here. I have him as the lightweight Bilal Muhammad. The guy does nothing good, just everything pretty much kind of average, and he's gonna beat those guys that are 15 to 20, but he ain't gonna make a splash nowhere in the top 10.
Exactly, and you touched on him having one foot out the door, the full-time realtor, and having a successful career as a realtor at that. I just can't imagine he has the same drive or focus as somebody like Bobby Green, who just signed that new contract with the UFC. If this does stay standing, I think Green will probably 30-27 him. I think he's the longer, faster striker. And on top of that, he's way more active. Yeah. Honestly, taking 2 years off at MMA at 34 years old,
I think he's had some surgeries and stuff too as well, man.
It usually doesn't pan out well for you. Unless your name's TJ Dillashaw, that's a tough comeback off of 2 years. And to treat it as a hobby, the UFC just isn't the place to do that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Bobby Green, it's in the business of picking winners, man. And, I think Bobby Green is going to win this fight. So I might look into it later on in the week. We might consider it.
Our next fight takes place in the middleweight division, where we see the UFC debut of the stylebender killer Alex Pereira taking on Andre Michailidis. This is a tough one for me, man. Obviously, they're putting Alex Pereira in here to get a highlight reel knockout. Michailidis has had all four of his losses by knockout, and Pereira has the touch of death. That being said, Pereira's 3-1. He lost his last kickboxing match. He's not active enough for me to really want to back him here as a heavy favorite. And for what it's worth, in his first MMA fight in 2015, he did get submitted, and I think that Michailidis is the much more well-rounded fighter here. I don't know if Michailidis is going to be the UFC fighter to whoop Alex Pereira's ass, but I'm not comfortable with laying the price tag on Alex Pereira. He doesn't have the same type of footwork as Israel Adesanya did, so I don't think that the takedown defense is going to be as good as Izzy's either. I'm hoping that Michailidis comes in here and just fucking sells out for a takedown. Whether he gets killed in the process, I want him to at least try and test the takedown defense of Pereira here.
Yeah, Michailidis, he's been at MMA Masters for the last couple of weeks. It only looks to be like 3 or 4 weeks. I don't really necessarily know how much game planning and stuff they're doing for him there. But you've got to think that grappling is the front focus of
He'd be an idiot if
exactly,
he didn't.
right? And he is a BJJ black belt on the mat, but man, he really likes to kind of just sit down and strike with the guys a whole lot of times. And we took a shot on KB Bueller at plus 200 the last time out against him, man, because I do think a kickboxer can cause him trouble, and I think Pereira is going to mollywop him if you want my real honest opinion. And I'd be the first. I mean, I've faded Clarissa Shields the first time out. I faded Clarissa Shields the second time out in cash the last time. It's like, I am eager to, for a kickboxer to come in here thinking that they are good at MMA and get taken down and submitted. But like you said, I don't think Michaelitis is the one to do it. Pereira's been training with Glover a whole lot recently as well, so I know he's working on his takedown defense. And when you watch his very first pro MMA fight in the first round, when he drops a guy, he jumps the back, he tries to put his hooks in. In the third round, he almost pulls off an armbar from guard. I mean, even in 2015, the guy is showing me glimpses of, hey, I train a little bit of jiu-jitsu and stuff, so I don't want to go out all on a limb and just say that he's absolutely lost on the mat. But I think it could take a little bit higher level than some people are anticipating to take him down and cause him some issues. On the feet, man, he's finished Izzy, he's finished Dustin Jacoby. He's a very, very talented kickboxer, a nice body kick to really back you up. And once he backs you up against the cage, you really don't have anywhere else to go. But he forces you into a striking exchange where he's just far, far superior. And I really like him to get the knockout. I don't want to lay minus 250 either, but for a talented kickboxer, inside the distance is around plus 105. So I know you're going to get his knockout at plus 115, plus 120, because it's probably his likely path to victory. And that's probably something that I'm going to hit, maybe even as round one prop. But I don't really want to risk him in a parlay, I'll be honest with you. If you're going to play Michaelitis, you do get a pretty decent price tag right now, but I'm not sure he makes it out of the first round. And if he does, if he's still alive and conscious, you're going to get a fantastic price tag come round two for Michaelitis. Pickett's Alex Pereira, first round knockout, but hey, I wouldn't be unhappy if his debut got spoiled.
The D-Gen in me is taking stabs at Michaelitis inside the distance plus 400 or better. That's I just can't help it, and I just think that when you see a 3-1 record on anybody coming into the UFC, you know that they're being pushed a little too early, too fast.
A win here, man, with a win over Izzy in kickboxing, he's going to call him out and stuff on Saturday, and I feel like Alex Pereira is going to get pushed pretty quickly, and it'll end up ending bad for him eventually, I think. Mm-hmm. Opening up the 268 main card, we have Frankie Edgar, who's 24-9-1, taking on Marlon Chito Vera, who's 19-7-1. Man, Frankie Edgar has been working a whole lot with Cody Garbrandt this camp, working on the boxing and stuff, and as well as just looking online at the pictures, as always, incredible shape, and the training looks to be rooted around wrestling, which I really like because I think that's a main path to victory that Frankie could have here. He's finally down at at bantamweight, where a lot of people thought he was, sized for, and he's going to have his most success. But it's pretty crazy to think at one time he was the lightweight champion of the world, because in today's time he is severely undersized for that division. He just turned 40 like 2 or 3 weeks ago, man, and the wars he has been in over the time, it might started to catch up with him. He's lost 3 of his last 4 by TKO. Max Holloway also put a pretty good beating on him for over 5 rounds, but Korean Zombie TKOs him in first round. Brian Ortega drops him pretty good, and then the knee from Corey Sandhagen. I know that knocks anybody out, but that is a knockout that I'm worried could affect the future. And your ability to continue to take shots. And Frankie's last couple fights, even in the Munoz, it's not a fight. Not a lot of offense, man. He's kind of bouncing around the outside, looking to counter, and I really hope he's going to come in here with a more wrestling game plan, because I don't know if he necessarily wants to strike with Chito Vera, who's a pretty damn big bantamweight. He's training with Jason Perillo, and Marlon Vera's known from taking all the hype from Sugar Sean O'Malley. That's pretty much the only reason he's known, because other than that, he was a pretty mediocre fighter. The biggest knock on Marlon Vera, the tendency to drop round 1. He's a pretty slow starter. And Marlon being the favorite here, I would not be surprised if you get him at plus money after round 1. Frankie Edgar comes in there bouncing around on his feet. He's got cardio for days. I think he owns the most fight time in history, if I'm correct. So yeah, I think Frankie Edgar is probably going to take round 1. Marlon potentially take round 2 when he starts warming up. But yeah, man, I think Frankie is guaranteed to take at least one of these rounds, and sitting at plus money or plus 250, 220 for his decision prop. I think both of those are very playable, man. How about yourself?
Yeah, so I love his money line prop here. I think that he's the much better fighter. Frankie, since he's aged, his fights have become more and more difficult to cap, but only because you're questioning his durability now, which has never been a question in the past. Yeah. This could go one of two ways. Either Frankie's going to be able to get those takedowns like he did in the Pedro Munoz fight or the Jeremy Stephens fight.
Yeah,
both
Rodriguez fight.
Both really, all three of them really, really talented strikers who pack a lot of punch. And he was able to kind of bypass it, utilize that elite wrestling, or Vera cements the rumors and his chin is gone at 40 years of age. Here's one thing I do know about Edgar is he's somebody that will fight for my dollar. And I think he's kind of earned my respect as a fighter. And I'm convinced that he still has a few of those wins still in the tank. Where Marlon, he's in his 17th UFC fight, 7 years in the UFC, and he's only 28 years old. And that really is wild. But I'm not really seeing the improvements that I want to see over somebody with a lengthy UFC career. Marlon is somebody who's had plenty of opportunities to step up in the past in competition, but he just really hasn't delivered. You brought up the Sean O'Malley fight, and that's kind of the exception, but as we all know, it's not as clear-cut of a win as the record might suggest. I know we've said this before, but that bantamweight move, it was a little bit later than we hoped. But he was thrown into the wolves of one of the most stacked divisions in the UFC, and a win over Pedro Munoz holds a lot more weight in my book than a win over Marlon Vera would or Davey Grant. Yeah, I do think that Frankie's going to be able to pull out another one, probably by decision, just like the good old days. But taking Frankie Edgar at plus 155 is a fucking steal in my opinion. Marlon Vera hasn't proven to beat elite competition yet, and I don't think that Frankie Edgar's days are done.
Love everything you said, and if you agree on it, probably playing Frankie Edgar for Saturday.
Our next fight takes place in the featherweight division, where we see Shane Burgos taking on Billy Quarantillo, and I love this fight, man, especially for Burgos. Shane, he's looking to bounce back here from one of the scarier KOs to date. I guess 6 months is a long enough time to wait. I know he's still at Tiger Schulman's MMA as of 3 weeks ago on Instagram. And I don't really have a hot take for this fight, man. I think Burgos is just going to whoop Billy's ass. Billy seems to be the perfect comeback opponent for someone like Shane. Billy doesn't really throw with a ton of power. He's extremely durable, and he's relatively weak strength-wise for the division. Billy's been getting most of his work done in Florida at Gracie Tampa South, and has also been working with the former boxing champion Antonio Tarver in recent weeks for preparing for this match. Although I did just comment on the durability of Quarantillo, I don't think that this is a fight that he's going to be able to withstand that heat that Burgos is bringing over 3 rounds, and I don't think he has the defensive footwork to avoid those power shots like he'd need to. Burgos is one of the biggest guys in the featherweight division and has accumulated an 89% takedown defense over 9 fights in the UFC. And I really do think that Billy's going to have to try and find this to the mat, or get this to the mat to find success. And with only a 34% takedown defense of his own, I think he'll have a really tough time doing it. I like Burgos at minus 200. I'll also be putting Burgos inside the distance plus 200, and I could definitely be talked into the fight doesn't go the distance at even money. All those are big ones for me. How are you feeling for this?
So I'm not necessarily big on a fight getting finished here, but I'm 100% on the Shane Burgos side. And honestly, man, at minus 200, I'd play it straight, or I'd parlay it. Shane Burgos is the side here, man. It's a big step down from Josh Emmett, Edson Barboza. He doesn't have to worry about near the power or near the technicality of the striking coming back his way. Phenomenal pressure, man. Great gas tank. And if you let like Burgos dictate the pace of the fight, the dude is gonna just double you up in strikes. He'll work the body. He averages like over 7 strikes a minute, man. But you also gotta show that he absorbs over 6 coming back his way. His striking defense is pretty much a big hole that he's never patched up. And Billy Q's got a ton of volume, man. Billy Q averages over 7 strikes a minute himself. So they're both going to be there to be hit is what I'm getting at. Billy Q trains out of Tampa a little bit. He works with Matt Frivola some as well. and he's getting a massive step up from Mowgli Benitez, man. You know, he got his big step up against Gavin Tucker, and man, I remember backing Billy Q there, and Billy Q got his ass whooped from bell to bell that fight. I understand if people want to back Billy Q, especially at plus money, because win or lose, the dude is in great shape, and he's often there for the full 15 minutes, fighting for every last dollar that you put on him. And that's kind of where I'm at, where I don't think Billy Q's ever been finished on the feet, man, and he is just one tough son of a bitch that is always going to be walking forward, is always going to get in your face. And why, yes, that is kind of how he lost to Gavin Tucker, because every time he stepped forward, Gavin Tucker just hit him with something. And I think it's going to be the same with Shane Burgos. But Gavin Tucker also had the takedowns to be able to mix in there a little bit to kind of negate some of that pressure, because you could tell the forward pressure was kind of getting to Gavin Tucker a little bit from Billy just constantly walking him down. And he had the takedowns to go to kind of, I guess catch his breath a little bit, where Shane Burgos is going to consistently be striking for 15 minutes. And, popular podcast, Die Hard, is one of the round 3 sprinkle kind of people. And round 3 for Billy Q is always pretty interesting, because he's coming off, a round 3 finish of Gabriel Benitez. He's got a round 3 finish over Kyle Nelson. And then when you look at the history of round 3 for Shane Burgos, he was dropped twice by Josh Emmett in round 3. He got finished in round 3 by both Edson Barboza and Calvin Kattar. So, I don't want to say that his cardio just takes a dip and Shane Burgos has nothing to left in round 3, but that is a round that Billy is still going to be very strong on, and historically a round that has caused Shane Burgos some trouble. So I bet you get a pretty good price tag there. But, man, I got Shane Burgos here. I think he takes a 30-27 where he just beats the shit out of Billy Q, and Billy Q is just basically so tough he's able to take it to a decision. So I don't hate on your inside the distance, because Billy Q is going to be there to be hit, but I do lean Shane Burgos by decision.
I like it.
Next up in the lightweight division, we have, an absolute killer fight between Justin the Highlight Gaethje, who's 22-3, taking on Iron Michael Chandler, who's 22-6. And man, this is an interesting fight, because you've got both guys coming off unsuccessful opportunities at capturing the belt, but more, or less for Michael Chandler, because, it was kind of a decade in the making before coming over to the UFC, and, he kind of got a generous run to the belt by Dana White, and, he didn't make good of opportunity, and now he's got to fight and claw his way through one of the hardest divisions, on the planet. With Justin Gaethje, he's been out a little bit over a year since losing to Khabib. But prior to that, man, he was just on an absolute tear. Since moving with Whitman, he's become he can still brawl, but it's much more technical approach. He kind of lets the fight come to him instead of just crashing forward and taking a ton of damage in return. He's got good timing on his right hand, but it's most obvious what Gaethje's best weapon in, and it's his calf kick. You saw Hooker. Hooker landed 8 strikes against Michael Chandler. All 8 of them were calf kicks, and it was really, really causing Chandler some issues. DeBronx, what's he open with? A calf kick that legitimately puts Michael Chandler on his butt. Justin Gaethje is going to have the opportunities to land those on Michael Chandler's wide stance. It's going to cause some issues. Where Chandler, he's out of Sanford MMA, and one of the best live bets I've made all year is I emptied the tank on Charles Oliveira at -125 when I saw Michael Chandler walking back to his corner after round 1. The dude was zapped. And, maybe it was an adrenaline dump being so close to capturing that belt, or maybe it's the fact that the 3 fights before that, ended with first-round KOs as well. He's so much muscle, man, and the firefight that Justin Gaethje is going to bring, I think, is going to exhaust Michael Chandler. Gaethje does not take a step back, and I think he's going to break Michael Chandler, and I think he's going to get a finish late in round 2, man.
Yeah, so you touched on the fact that he kind of got a favorable route to to UFC Gold, and I think that's probably the closest he ever gets. Like you said, at 35 years old, kind of late to join the game, and I think that right now, after losing that shot at the belt, he's going to be in for a pretty long losing streak at this point in his career. Just like it's just sharks in the top of the division, and just like last week, we saw a probable opponent for the loser of this fight in Islam Makhachev. It's just not looking good for the future if you don't win this fight right here. Now he's taking on the king of violence in Justin Gaethje, and I think that Gaethje's going to be able to break Chandler. Gaethje is known for eating shots, which isn't the best thing, but since he's moved to training with Trevor Whitman, he definitely has improved in his ability to hit and not get hit, and we saw a lot of that in the Tony Ferguson fight. At this point, he is a completely new fighter than the one that showed up against Michael Johnson, and it's really all good things. One thing I do want to touch on, and you touched on it a little bit, is that calf kick. You know, I think that we will. Gaethje has been quoted saying he only needs
2 or 3. Man.
Two, I think like it's that. 2. Could be 4. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't use a quote if I don't know it. But he is known for his calf kicks, and Michael Chandler really needs to be heavy on that front foot to land his power shots. That being said, Gaethje, he takes shots. You know, I know that I just said that he's learned to kind of improve those skills, but I do think that first round is going to be an absolute shit show, and I'm not looking past Chandler's ability to end a fight with one punch. When Chandler does inevitably try and use his wrestling because he's getting touched up on the feet, it'll most likely be too late. He won't have that power off that lead leg, and Gaethje has really developed this really good defensive striking stance, and we saw it in the Khabib fight where Khabib for a little bit had some difficulty finding that entry point for his wrestling, but it is Khabib. He is the best. Hard to make comparisons to Chandler, who refuses to wrestle at this point in his career, and Gaethje. Personally, I think that, like I said, shit show first round, and then we'll start to see Gaethje take over. That those initial calf kicks really start to wear, and as Michael Chandler sits down on the bench, very similar to that Charles Oliveira, he's going to realize he's got to make a choice. He either goes all for it in that second round, and either gets the win or he gets knocked out. I think this fight will end in the second round, and I definitely see it going Gaethje's way as well.
One thing I do want to touch for Chandler. He was using the right hand to the body very, very well in that Dan Hooker fight to set up, his shots up top. And we've seen Gaethje, take the high guard route where he'll, and you saw where Dustin Poirier and Eddie Alvarez's coach were like, go to the body, then the head will die. And they started wearing out the body. Eventually, they were able to land that punch up top. And they don't pack as much power as I think Michael Chandler is going to pack, especially in round 1. So I do think some body work from Michael Chandler could pose big success for him here. But man, I like Justin Gaethje, like you said, to break him. I like that we both see it coming in round 2. We beat the line movement. 2 units on Justin Gaethje, is it? Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We move on to the co-main event of the evening, where we see a rematch taking place for the strawweight belt. Rose Namajunas is taking on Weili Zhang in our first rematch on the card. And we've already decided to move in on it as a podcast. We took Rose in the first matchup as an underdog at plus 180, and we were pleasantly surprised to see her as an underdog yet again. Since the last fight, we've seen some of the same things from Rose: the constant training, getting work in with girls like Raquel Pennington, Tisha Torres, JJ Aldridge, and ultimately training under the wing of Trevor Whitman and Pat Barry. But on the other side, we've seen very, very different things from Weili, who completely switched up her camps. Is now training at Fight Ready MMA with Eddie Cha, and if you follow her on any social medias, you'll see that she's been directly working with Henry Cejudo and Davison Figueiredo. Honestly, I think that this is a tailor-made fight for the lengthy striking of Rose, and I really do wish we would have seen that first fight play out a little bit more so that we could draw from that matchup. But I do think that Weili getting pieced up by those sharp strikes of Rose was inevitable. There's a Rose fight that I like to draw a lot of comparisons to, and it's kind of what I've made my decision on in their first matchup, and it's that Andrade fight. Andrade is another heavily muscled striker with the power to control the fight anywhere she wants, and I think that this is a very similar in the fact that there'll be 2 big things, and it's whether or not the judges will put more weight on the cleaner striking of Rose, or if they're going to or put more weight on the impact of the shots that Weili lands. I think that Weili will have the more powerful shots, but ultimately I think Rose will outstrike her.
So, inside the distance, or you potentially see Rose decision?
I actually see this one going to decision. I think that we'll see this play out a whole lot more than we did in the last fight. I think that the finishing upside is on Rose's side. Weili, I mean, I guess could dump her on her head like Andrade did, but I think that Rose is going to be able to withstand anything that Weili brings and piece her apart to a decision. I think we see this one play out a whole lot longer than we did the first one.
I feel you. I mean, round 3 with Rose and Andrade, it did get kind of sketch, with that forward pressure and stuff. So I do get a little bit worried as the fight progresses because Zhang Weili did show us that she's got some dog in her in that Joanna fight. But I actually see this one going to decision as well, man. Nice. I really do. She goes up there and knocks Joanna and Jacek out in round 1. What does she do the next time in the rematch? Decisively beats her over 5 rounds, and I think it's very opportunistic, and I think she can do it again here. With Zhang Weili, she has made every excuse under the book, in my opinion. She talks about the crowd booing her, the whole communism USA stuff. She's now switching camps, and sure, Fight Ready is going to have you in phenomenal shape, but over the course of 4 or 5 weeks that she's there, Fight Ready is not changing this girl, into a completely new fighter. They might make her better conditioned, but conditioning's not what lost her that fight to Rose Namajunas. She was biting on every single one of Rose's feints, and I literally remember saying a couple seconds before that head kick that she was just biting on everything, and I saw the left high kick from Rose coming, and I feel like somebody like myself being able to see a read is the longer this fight goes, Rose is going to have those reads open. With Zhang Weili, though, there's a lot to like with her, man. When she throws, and she doesn't loop anything. It's all right down the middle. It's very technical, and she thrives in a dirty fight. But I think she can get out volume, man. She landed the harder strikes and swelled up Joanna's head, but I personally, a little bit of love for Joanna, but I think Joanna, probably won that fight, man.
If there wasn't a big old hematoma on her head, I think that
exactly, man. Yeah. And I think Rose poses the same level of striking. I know Joanna's got the Muay Thai background, but Rose has proven that she can strike at that high of a level.
Outstrike Joanna at that level.
When you look at all the experience Zhang Weili has on paper, it's 21-2. Dude, they're cans compared to who Rose has fought. Rose's 10-4 record dates back going through tough fighting, number 1 contenders, fighting Carla Esparza and stuff, who pretty much got snubbed for a title shot right here because Weili is just an absolute global superstar. But Rose, I think we talked about someone earlier, and I kind of said it like Sean O'Malley. Rose makes herself look so much bigger in the octagon. When she's the same size as a lot of the girls in her weight class, but when she uses her length and her range,
Ode Osbourne.
Exactly. She looks so much bigger than a lot of girls in there. She exits the clinch so well with her left hook. And you know what, man? I really think that if she were to get Zhang Weili down or drop her again, I think she's posed to hop on the back and catch a sub this time too. I'm going to go Rose Namajunas. I do 100% think it goes longer than the last one. Could potentially go to decision here where we see Rose Namajunas just outpoint her because she's the cleaner, more technical striker over 25 minutes.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And if you do like that Rose by submission, I know I've seen a couple people take a stab on it. It's sitting at plus 700 on BetOnline. If that's an opportunity you see, that's a pretty good price tag.
That is a pretty good price tag. I'm pretty invested though in Rose at even money, man, and I think I'm most comfortable playing her money line.
I like it.
In our main event of the evening, it's the most anticipated rematch that comes to mind for me, man. We've got Kamaru Usman, who's 19-1, taking on Colby Covington, who's 16-2 for the welterweight strap on Saturday. This is clearly the best 2 welterweights in the world right now for me, and you could seriously run this fight back 100 times, and I don't think one of them takes it more than 60, man. And to have this line indicating that Kamaru Usman takes it almost 75 times is pretty outrageous to me, to be honest with you. When you look at the judges' scorecards going in to round 5 there, one's got it 3-1 for Colby, one's got it 3-1 for Usman, and one has it 2-2. Rounds 2 and 4 were extremely close, but I personally lean with the judge that had it 3-1 Colby. I give rounds 2 and 4 to him, man, and at this price, I think it's an absolute must gamble here with Kamaru Usman. He's the new pound for pound best fighter in the world right now. Somehow, I get it, he's inactive, but he's jumped John Jones now as the number 1 pound for pound fighter. And hate the guy or not, man, I know he's not my favorite, but he has proven that active right now. I think he's the best champion that we got. And he has made improvements, man. He's knocked out after considered pillow-fisted and going to so many decisions to go out there and finish Gilbert Burns and Jorge Masvidal, who've never been knocked out. it's real evident that Kamaru Usman is making his improvements. But to sit here and think that Colby, who's wanted this rematch so bad, who's moved to MMA Masters, got all the Brazilian distractions off of him at ATT, doesn't want this fight and isn't going to show up improved and in the best shape. I mean, it's stupid to think Colby has not made any type of improvements. He's just not been as active as Kamaru because he's not held the belt and he's not been forced to, because the welterweight division is full of sharks, man. And, like it or not, Colby knew this rematch was coming for him, and it would have been dumb of him to take another fight, in my opinion. When I watched the fight back today, I watched it with the sound on, I watched it with the sound off, and I really, really wanted to go into this and really make a good read. And, man, I come out with extreme confidence at plus 250, Colby can stand a fucking good chance of winning this fight, man. How about yourself?
He is the value side, no doubt in my mind. I don't really care how this fight plays out. He's the fucking value side, man. I'll give credit where credit's due. I watched Dan Hardy's breakdown, and he does an excellent job of it. One of the parts of it that he focused on was in the opening exchanges, Usman kind of looked to reach down at a leg and attempt a takedown, and then kind of hesitated and went back up, and you saw Colby point to his leg, almost inviting him in to get that takedown. And I think that's all I really need to know as far as who's the better grappler. Yeah. Not to say that...
Dude, Usman wouldn't grapple with Burns for years at Sanford MMA.
Right. Not to say that Usman is the inferior wrestler, but I do think that Usman uses a whole lot more energy to grapple at a high level. Yeah. And if there's one thing that Colby's got going for him, it's his cardio, it's his pace. And, whether it's the volume of strikes, which he outstruck Usman in 3 of the 4 rounds that we did see to completion, or the scrambles on the ground, I just think Colby has more in the tank. It's likely due to the fact that that he doesn't carry as much muscle mass as Usman. Yeah. Usman's one of those fighters that really does. You can see him throw those power shots, and recently, since moving to Trevor Whitman, he has kind of toned in on those short, straight strikes. But I do think that Colby, like you said, it's hard to tell if he's making improvements, but if you go onto his Instagram and you can weed through those big booty women, he is making improvements. Yeah. And like you said, he's in the gym, and maybe 2 years off for somebody, or not 2 years, but a year off in between fights for somebody at such a high level that Colby is, it's maybe not the worst thing, man. And for people to be drawing as much as they are from the 3 fights that Usman's had, it's 2 of those to Jorge Masvidal, who in my opinion is the most overrated fighter in the UFC. Point blank, he is the most overrated fighter.
He loses to every top 7 welterweight on the list right now.
Yes, and then I hate to shit on Burns. Burns is a really, really good fighter, but if you mean to tell me that Colby doesn't also whoop Burns' ass, I'd say you're lying. Colby is just as good of a fighter and would have put on just as good of performances against those 2 guys right there. In my opinion, it's tough to say that this is going to go much different than that first fight, and that first fight was a fucking coin flip. Yeah. This is a spot that, like you said, you have to take advantage of at plus 250, and I'm loving that we're both on Colby's side here.
I am too, man. For Colby, some things I just could take away from watching it. He threw 111 strikes in round 1, and he threw 97 in round 2. And it was very obvious from the beginning that Kamaru was going to invest in the body. He kept throwing the right hand to the body, the knees up the middle when they would clinch. Colby started with a little bit too high of a pace, and in my opinion, to keep it up, even though he's got the cardio that he has.
Maybe if Usman wouldn't have faked that body shot, it might have paid off for him.
Right, Yeah. But I think Colby, the striking defense for Usman, it's not the best, to be honest with you. Colby had plenty of openings where he was landing, and then we saw Gilbert Burns almost drop him like twice, So the striking defense it's not improved by no means. So the openings will be there for Colby. Just take your time, reset. If you don't like something, we saw him overextend trying to get that 3rd or 4th shot in, and that's when Usman counters and lands one of those big rights. Land the kicks to the body kicks were going phenomenal for Colby. Keep landing those, step back, reset. You're southpaw. You have a big advantage landing the left hand. Just don't force it. Don't rush it, man. On the side of Kamaru, he did a lot of things well, to be honest with you. The body work, while it didn't prove, like evident up front, I feel like come round 4 and 5, you could see Colby fading. And then finally in round 5, Usman started to throw that left hook behind the right hand, and it caught Colby. And that's a punch that a lot of people did not see in that fight. It was the right hand that put Colby down, but when he threw that left hook before it, man, it caught Colby on the noggin and kind of sent him wobbling a little bit, man. So, I don't just want to sit here and knock Kamaru Usman because I don't like the guy, but I do recognize talent. But minus 290 is flat out absurd because, like you said, I saw a coin flip and watching it back with no sound, I was 3-1 Colby going into that 5th round. I know you like Colby by decision, but I've been trying to talk you into doesn't go the distance at minus 120. It reminds me of the Jorge fight a little bit. It's a ton of animosity. It's a rematch. Both of these guys want to finish each other. I think they both leveled up. And for the animosity between the two, it sits at minus 120. So that's kind of enticing to me because you don't have to play a ton. It's not at minus 185, minus 200. So maybe I can talk you into it, but I'm glad that we are on the Colby side, man.
Yeah, for sure. And I got to think of one more thing. People are putting a lot of weight on Kamaru's ability to knock out Jorge Masvidal. It's a whole lot easier to land a really, really good punch on a pure striker when you have a threat of a takedown. We saw that in the Khabib versus Conor McGregor fight. Yeah. McGregor's a way fucking better striker, but he sure as hell did get caught by that shot because he has to worry about those takedowns. In this fight, Colby's not worrying about that. If he can figure out a way to get past that reach of Usman, I think Colby's just going to overwhelm him. And like you said, happy that we're both on him.
I wouldn't hate if Colby mixes in any of the wrestling. It's the wrestling that got him to the belt. And like you said, dabbing at the leg, Usman not. It's confident to me before that, just looking at credential-wise and looking at how they got to the belt. Colby's wrestling is way more dominant. I would not hate if he mixes in any type of wrestling just to give Usman a little bit more to think about, or maybe put him on the cage for a couple minutes, to wear
even if
him.
He's not successful with those takedowns. Like you said, wearing on him, draining those big muscles out of Kamaru Usman, that's Colby's best shot to win.
Yeah, and if he, Colby is not the best striker, so if he goes in there and fakes a couple takedowns, it's only going to let his hands, land even more, man. I like Colby Covington, and God, I love him at plus 250. Finishes the breakdown for all 14 fights on UFC 268. But as always, we're going to do a little bit of a recap. The casual cap for the night is going to be on the Edmen versus Nassourdine Imavov fight. For one, it is more of the closely aligned fights, but it's also stylistically wise. The guys mirror each other quite similarly. And it's going to suck if you beat me with my boy Edmen, man. If there's a fight of the night, man, besides the main event, obviously, what's that one for you?
That's got to be the Gaethje Chandler fight, man. I mean, I think that one, like I said, that first round is going to be an absolute shit show. But I think that we're going to see some fireworks regardless.
Man, I would be. Unless Chandler somehow panic wrestles and find his way on top, that's destined to be fireworks. For me, man, I got chills rewatching it again, breaking it down. Rose versus Zhang Weili for me is an absolute killer fight, and it's the fucking women's strawweight. So it doesn't typically get me up like that, but that's a much anticipated rematch, man. And God, I would love nothing more than Rose to come out on top again. For me, it's kind of going to be no shock for a fighter to watch as Ian Garry. He's a guy that I've been talking about for weeks, man, anticipating this debut. I love everything about this kid, to be honest with you. I just hope the UFC does him the right way and doesn't bring him up too fast.
Far less hype than my fighter to watch. Mine's going to be Chris Barnett. I know I've been shitting on him, but yeah, if you're going to bring somebody in to just kind of be entertained, that's going to be a fighter that's going to entertain you, and something that you got to see in the octagon at least once.
What about an underdog?
For an underdog, we already played him. Colby Covington, man. I think that we're getting incredible value on him, and we also pick him to win.
Yes, sir. Probably the other underdog that we're probably going to take a shot on, and Frankie Edgar here. Decision prop for him is pretty juicy, and Marlon has never been finished before, so the DGen to me might stab at that. But you're already getting plus 155 on Frankie, and sometimes we like to be real mature about it and stuff, and take that money line. Frankie's a damn good underdog with a chance. Our prop bets a little different, yeah. So for me, the prop bet I like, I think that Alex Pereira is going to mollywop Michaelitis. So I like Pereira inside the distance at plus 105. That's the only thing out right now. But you're going to get a really good. You'll even get more plus money on him by knockout, and he's a kickboxer. So yeah, Pereira by knockout or inside the distance.
Yeah, and mine goes completely against it. I didn't realize it till now, but I've got Michaelitis inside the distance plus 450. Again, it's just kind of one of those incredible value spots. This will be Pereira's first real test, in my opinion, and first real test against a legitimate, rounded out MMA fighter. Maybe not the best, but definitely his hardest test to date.
So that fight is sitting at like minus 175, doesn't go the distance.
It's probably a good bet for us. I mean, if we both see
the other guy, right?
Yeah, I think it's something we got to consider.
I think so too, man. And what about your best bet on Saturday?
Best bet's going to be Shane Burgos. I find a lot of difficulty trying to find places that Quarantillo would better Shane Burgos in, other than getting it to the mat. I think Shane Burgos is just too big to for Billy to be able to hold him down there.
I really want us to find a way to play Burgos. I'd almost lay minus 200 on him straight up, but 5 dimes and bet online minus 185, minus 190. So man, if that slips below minus 200, I think you're gonna end up seeing a play from us. For me, shit, maybe we parlay it with Burgos, man. Dustin Jacoby it's a minus 290, so you don't really want to play him straight up, but I think his team knows that he has got John Allen's number on the feet, and he's stuffed enough takedowns from a much higher level of competition to keep this on the feet and have success. Yeah, man, that wraps it up for us. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Hop in the comments, interact with us a little bit. Let us know who you guys have in these rematches. Helps the video go viral and get a little popularity for us. We'll see you guys next week.
Peace.